Live from Johannesburg, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton. Seeking closure. Tonight, a woman whose husband was killed in the lead up to the Marikana massacre still feels ignored. We let her share her story. Plus, does South Africa's law enforcement look less like a police service and more like a military? We ask police watchdog Robert McBride if demilitarizing the force will prevent another Marikana. And we get Amnesty International's new Secretary General's plans on dealing with human rights abuses. He's our very own Kumi Naidu. On Tonight with Jane Dutton. Tonight we focus on the forgotten. 6 years ago today, police shot and killed 34 miners in Marikana. In the lead up to the day that shook South Africa, 10 others were killed. A widow of one of those 10 still wants answers. Why is she and others left out of yearly commemorations? That's my question tonight. What's yours? Our phone lines are now open. Call us on 011-759-6340 and tweet us at hashtag Tonight with Jane Dutton. But first, let's get today's news from Tembekile.
Jane, thank you. Let's get straight into it. These are our top stories tonight. The Springs couple accused of keeping their 5 children captive in their home have been convicted. For over a decade, the children were beaten, tormented with a blowtorch and a shock stick. They were also not allowed to attend school. Their home in Springs was dubbed the House of Horrors. The father has been found guilty of rape, attempted murder, child abuse and drug possession. Their mother has been convicted on charges of child neglect and defeating the ends of justice. Her bail has been extended while the father remains in custody tonight.
Evidence of the witnesses, as well as the expert evidence and the evidence of the accused itself, proved that she was subjected to this ill treatment, tantamount to torture. We are satisfied with the court's judgment. I think it was a good judgment, well-balanced judgment.
The woman who taught us how to spell and own respect has died. Queen of Soul Aretha Franklin died at her home in Detroit this morning. The 75-year-old passed away after battling advanced pancreatic cancer. Franklin was placed in hospice care just 3 days ago. One of her most famous songs, Respect, became an anthem for women's rights across the globe.
That went straight to #1 here in the United States. She followed it up with 111 other singles, 112 singles to her name, 18 Grammy Awards. She was in the American Top 40 all the way through from 1967 until 1998. It was a remarkable musical achievement.
And the Supreme Court of Appeal hasn't been able to help SASSA clean up its mess. The agency wants the court to prevent private companies from taking money from grant recipients. At least 12.5 million South Africans depend on SASSA for an income. Beneficiaries still using the old SASSA Grindrod card say private companies are taking up to half of their grants in dubious deductions. But the court may refuse the application for several reasons, one of which is that the High Court found that the deductions were lawful. SASSA plans to phase out the old cards by September.
It's bare bones. What SASSA wants is for the Supreme Court of Appeal to allow it to appeal a judgment from the High Court, basically saying that Net1 and subsidiaries that make deductions can do so from the old white SASSA Grindrod cards. And those are the cards that are being phased out. So one of the considerations of the Supreme Court of Appeal is whether it should even hear this case when those are the cards that are being phased out, hopefully by the end of the year.
And you're up to date with all the latest news here on ENCA. It's back to Jane now.
To this day, the Marikana massacre fuels mistrust towards the police. Many still wonder why a new South African police service was so brutal in stopping the protest. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate investigated 77 police officers. Tonight, IPID head Robert McBride joins us. It's very good to have you with us.
Yes, thank you.
Tell us about your investigations into the Marikana massacre and what happened before. What it is that you found?
Okay. Firstly, we deal with the situations where police are the focus of our investigations. So where the victims, for example, have not died as a result of police action, it's not part of our mandate, although in certain circumstances we can. So there's a number of cases where police have been involved. There's a case on the 12th of August 2012, and it's a case of the 34 miners who were shot. And then there's a case of a body found in a canter, which was also on the fateful day of the 34. And then some torture cases which occurred 5 days after the incident on the 16th. And on all the cases, we had prosecution-driven investigations. And on all the cases, we had completed our investigation and submitted to the NPA. Except for the case of the 34, which we are still awaiting a decision. The other cases, decisions have been made to prosecute. The status of the torture and assault that took place a few days after the incident, I'm not certain of the status now. At some stage it was provisionally withdrawn, but the other cases were completed last year already, one in April, the first one in April, and of the 34 was on the August last year. So,
how much can you tell us about your findings and what you have found out about the actions of police against those miners?
Well, for example, on the 12th, there was, based on what we have and from the video footage which we've seen there, and remember the events preceding the tragic events of the 16th could have led to the kind of rise in temperature and cause the atmosphere to be toxic. So there's one incident where marchers were marching, and there seemed to be, from what we interpret on the video footage, a kind of courting of confrontation by the police. And in that incident, 2 policemen were killed and 3 miners were shot. Our views, and we were not there on the day, we didn't make the decisions on the day. We did recommend prosecution for a number of senior police officers, was that one could have been avoided. But by then a number of people had been killed already, so tension was quite high at that stage. I mean, I must also hasten to say that whilst we investigate police, we would just appeal on people in future not to bring weapons to protests. It heightens tensions on all sides. So people have a right to protest.
Still, I suppose, in your work, you need to look at how far police can be pushed.
Yes, yes.
And when it is necessary to use force. But I should imagine it's never necessary to shoot people when they're lying down, shoot them in their back, findings which came out recently in the ISS report. And the fact that police didn't have to act the way they did.
Well, the issue is very simple in South African law, is the immediate threat to life or limb. And once a threat has stopped, you have to cease the use of force immediately. So the threat has to be imminent and about to take place, and there has to be a real threat. And certainly from all the incidents that we have viewed, that hasn't always been the case. So clearly the moment you overstep the boundaries of self-defense or defense and protection of others, it becomes illegal, and so it becomes an offense. So that's what we look at. But
so how illegal was what we saw in your view? And do you think the police could have done it differently? And also, were you allowed to do your work?
On all the incidents, we didn't have the level of cooperation we should have. In fact, in some instances, there was clearly attempts to sabotage any investigation and to cover up.
By the police?
By the police, yes. I think if you remember, there are different angles of footage by different media houses, and you don't see the whole picture. There isn't a kind of helicopter picture view of what is going on. But there certainly appeared, at least for the case on the 16th, the incident, the big incident, there certainly appears to be beyond the bounds of self-defense. So there's, from what we could see.
Okay, and you said that you put names forward. Why are they not sitting in jail? What's the hang-up there?
Well, on the case of the 16th, we are awaiting a decision from the National Prosecuting Authority. On all the other cases, including transgression of the Commissions Act and defeating the ends of justice subsequent to the Fulham Commission findings. So we have submitted that, and those cases should be decided soon. So on the 34, we are awaiting a decision. We had a joint team with the NPA team collecting evidence, and on their direction, where there's insufficient evidence to get to complete statements, to find more witnesses. So we've done as much as we can do from IPID side.
Okay, I want to talk to you about this call by the ANC. They're calling for the demilitarization of the police. NEC member Zizi Kodwa spoke to us yesterday. Let's listen to what he had to say about that. Okay.
Firstly, we must demilitarize police. We must restrain police in order to be able to recapacitate them to deal with crowd control in terms of public order. And it's important to do all these things, including not limited to compensation to victims. We should not close, but I think it will heal because it will not bring back the families of 44 people who died in Marikana.
Would that help going forward?
Well, you mentioned before the clip demilitarization. The problem with demilitarization is there are different interpretations by different academics or students or practitioners of policing. And we need to get a common understanding of what it means. In some instances, a militaristic approach to policing can increase discipline. In some instances, that approach could result in non-thinking automatons who just carry out orders on command. So it's a kind of balance and a trade-off, but we must be clear what we're talking about.
Isn't the aim to take out the militancy in the police, though?
Well, remember, the South African Police Service is the oldest organization in this country. So with the older the organization, the more rigid are its traditions and cultures, and the more resistant to change.
Okay, so can I dive in there?
Yeah.
You came face to face with this in the apartheid years.
Yep.
The militancy of the police there.
Yeah.
How different is it now? Have we learnt lessons, and have we learnt the right lessons from that time?
No, we haven't. In essence, and sometimes commentators or people in high office muddy the waters by quick-term solutions. There's no quick fix. You have to put in place systems and processes, and there would be a lag time before you see a swing around. Now, there's been instability in the police for some time, and some people who were not knowledgeable about policing have been in positions of decision-making and authority. And this has muddied the water and hasn't allowed the police to evolve sufficiently within a constitutional democracy. The result is some of the old habits are still with us. For example, we investigate in torture against people who tortured people during apartheid. They continue to torture them and were protected. In fact, were utilized by senior police officers as counter-investigations against IPID. And we had to resort by going to court to get them interdict against them, to prevent them from doing investigations where they have an interest. And senior officers would choose people who were specifically suspects of IPID to counter-investigate IPID on trumped-up charges. Yeah.
When you were nearly arrested as well, weren't you?
We were arrested a few times, yeah.
Yes.
In constitutional South Africa, in democratic South Africa, whilst I was the executive head of IPID, on trumped-up charges, all because we refused to obey the instructions of a minister who wanted an investigation to go in a particular direction.
So if you are getting arrested several times while you're supposed to be the watchdog, the police watchdog, what sort of message is that for South Africans? Because police have to clear up their act. South Africans don't trust them, and why should they?
Well, it sends out the wrong message, because purpose of arrest is to ensure a suspect, I mean, we're not beyond the law, so a suspect to ensure that they appear in court, that they face the charges. By the way, none of the times when we've been arrested was there ever evidence led. It was withdrawn when it comes to court. we're basically
Just
begged by the NPA to make
tactic.
representations. But the message is simply that as it was 30 years ago, so does it continue. Because arbitrary arrest is not consistent with the human rights environment and the human rights culture.
So where to from here? What do you think needs to be done immediately? Because I should imagine until you get closure at Marikana, the victims will never be able to move on.
Yeah.
The police force needs to clean up its act.
Yeah.
does
And
it do all that?
well, one of the issues is IPID should be allowed to do its work. I mean, the purpose IPID exists is to ensure that the abuses of the past are never repeated, so that police are kept in check. Police have enormous powers, the powers of stop and search, demanding identity, arrest, use of force, and that has to be balanced with a higher level of accountability. And hence, IPID is the constitutional body that is intended to exercise that investigative oversight over the police. IPID should be allowed to do its work. It should not be interfered with by senior police officers, and neither political office bearers.
And I believe you give your work to bodies like the NPA. Do you think the cleanup, the start of the cleanup, will help your work?
Absolutely. We have not been happy with the tardiness with which cases against senior police officers have been handled. And we've made this public, and we've taken it up in a responsible way with the NPA on a number of occasions. We did not get any joy. There is a feeling that something's happening now, and we've seen it in some of the decisions being made. People are making decisions without looking over their shoulder. So for me, there is a chink of sunlight coming through.
Does it matter who chooses the head of the NPA? Because everybody should be held accountable, regardless of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's, you're looking at experience, you're looking at integrity, you're looking at a track record of doing the right thing. And so you would need someone that has that record, and that has perhaps even stood up to bullies and has that record. And so it is important, but people who throw the hat in the ring to be a National Director of Public Prosecution should know what is entailed. Should not throw the hat in the ring if they don't have the wherewithal.
And coming back down to the police force, or up to the police force, do you think the way people are brought in from, from day one, should that all be changed so you have a better understanding of who this person is, who their allegiances are to?
Absolutely. I think from the beginning, I've been working with municipal police, metro police, in developing a concept which we call keeping the water pure. So when people come in, they need to be vetted, assessed, some due diligence done on them, but you need to, in addition, filter them out from the beginning, have institutions and processes that continuously keeping the water pure until they pass out to the system and go into retirement. So you need it to do constantly, because the water that comes in now may not necessarily be the same water in 10 years' time. It might have been contaminated. That's the kind of concept you have. So it's, in a democracy, you have to continuously make use of institutions which are checks and balances on an attempt to prevent abuses.
But wonderful, as you say, that there's a chink of light coming in. Robert.
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead, in the lead up to the killings, 10 others were also killed. One of those 10 was burned alive inside his car. His name was Hassan Fundi. Tonight we talk to his widow, Aisha Fundi.